Hi! I posted a video short this past weekend leading up to this video where I held a contest to see who could guess or figure out the reference tensions needed to match the dynamic tensions of three very different rackets. In case you missed that video, here's a recap of it. I have three rackets here that was dropped off from a client, and these are three very different rackets, and he wanted them strung all at 50 pounds. But before I strung them, I asked, instead of stringing them at the same tension, do you really want them to feel the same? And of course he answered yes. So this will make a fun contest. The objective is to guess what tensions I'll need to string these three rackets to match the dynamic tension measured by an ERT 300. Okay, so I already strung this racket at 50 pounds with a polyester string, and it has a 107 head size with an 18 by 19 string pattern. So I'll be stringing these other two rackets with the same string. And oh, I forgot to mention, the DT on this was 33. So on these other two rackets, this is a 110 head size, and it has a 16 by 19 string pattern. And this final racket is a 98 head size with a 16 by 17 string pattern. I'd like to thank those who participated in the contest, and I'll announce the winner at the end of this video. But first, let's talk about dynamic tension measured with an ERT 300. In a nutshell, dynamic tension is what the player will feel when the ball makes contact with the strings, and then based on that feel, what happens to the ball after it leaves the strings. So if you know your preferred dynamic tension, or DT, the goal when having your racket strung to know what reference tension to ask for to get it. Since the DT value defines the playing characteristics of power and control, the first step is to know the proper DT mid-range based on your string setup. Then, based on trial and error during your practices and playing, make adjustments as needed. If you want to learn more about the DT mid-range guidelines that I used, watch this video. As you make these adjustments, go higher in the DT value if you want more control and precision. But beware, it can be harder on your arm as you go higher. If you want more easy power, go with a lower DT value, assuming you have the right amount of control to go along with it. So far what I've shared with you is all good, assuming that you play with one racket and one string setup. But what about the player that has a variety of frames depending on how she's playing, who he's playing, or what that person is playing on that particular day? Do you know that person? Well, here's a scenario that you can take your expertise to the next level using a general guideline that I put together, and ultimately using the ERT 300 to match dynamic tensions of different rackets. Now that I'm referring to different rackets, I'm specifically talking about head size and string patterns. Let's take a look at this chart where I break these two things into categories. The first parameter I wanted to talk about that makes a racket different is the head size. So if you look at this gray area here, I have a 95 head size, and then this 98 to 100, I grouped them together because I felt that they were similar. So if we're looking at this first category, when you go from a 95 head size to a larger head size, that's when you're going to increase the reference tension by 2 pounds, because as you go larger in head size, you go higher in reference tension. And then if you did it the other way around, let's say if you went from a 98 to 100 square inch head to a 95, then you would decrease the tension because you're going back the other way. So let's just take a look at the next category where I have a 98 to 100, and then you're going up to a 102, 105. Then again, you're going to increase the tension because you're going to a larger head. But if it was in reverse where you're going from a 102, 105, then that's when you're going to decrease the tension. So I have these categories based on head sizes that I felt was similar, and it goes all the way up to the 125 head size. All right, so the next parameter we're going to take a look at is the string pattern. And what I did here is, again, I grouped them to what I thought was similar. So this less than 14 by 18, these are rackets that are very open. And the next category would be the 16 by 18. So Anytime you're going from a very open string pattern to the next less open string pattern, that's when you're going to decrease the tension. So I put down 2 there. And if you did it in reverse where you're going from a dense to an open, then you would increase the tension because of the openness of the pattern. So hopefully that makes sense. But I'll take a look at this next category where I grouped the 16 by 18 here in this peach colored area. And then now you're going up to a 16 by 19. So I feel like a lot of times that's when you should decrease the tension because you're going to a more denser string pattern. And then you would do the reverse here because you're going from dense to an open. So it's the head size and string pattern that define what is a different racket. And if you're trying to match the dynamic tension of different rackets, this guideline will help you get started in the right direction. All right, so let's go back to this racket that I strung already at 50 pounds. And the reason why I strung this one first is that it was in between the 2 other rackets. So I thought starting with the 50 on this one would be a good baseline. So again, the DT was 33 on this, and it has a 107 head size with an 18 by 19 string pattern. So if you take a look at the chart that I prepared here, what you want to do is find out the head size. And if you look at the green row at the top under head size, I have the 107s and the 110s in the same category. So I'm not going to do any adjustment there on the tension. But if you look at string pattern on the last row there, the green again, we're going from 18 by 19. I don't have it here, but I'll count it as an 18 by 20. It has a very pretty dense string pattern on this one. And then we're going to go from a 18 by 19 to a 16 by 19. So if you look at the very last row in the green there, I have increased by 2 pounds. So a good starting point for this racket would be to string this one at 52. All right, so I'm sad to report that the DT measured at 31 after I strung this racket at 52. So for the sake of this video, I do want to match that DT of 33. I'm going to string it higher, of course, and looking at this chart, I'm thinking 4 pounds would be a little bit much, so I'm going to increase the reference tension by 3 more pounds, so it'll end up at 55. And if I come out with 32 or 34, I'll be okay with that, but I'm really hoping that it'll come out at 33. All right, so here's a moment of truth. I'm going to take the DT reading. Well, it's at 32, so I'm going to take it one more time just to make sure. Yeah, it's at 32, so it's right there. So I'm not going to restring this racket another time. But, I did get it 1 unit closer. So sometimes these rackets don't behave the way you think it will. And, it's a lot of it is trial and error. But I will log that into my records so that next time I'll string it even. I'll go up to 56 on this one. All right, so that's one down. Well, here's something I'm happy to report. I always take string bed deflection. I know it's not part of this contest. But at least the string bed deflection matched at 50, which was 50 on this racket. All right, so let's take a look at our second racket. And this racket has a very interesting dynamic, no pun intended. It's a 98 head size with a 16 by 17 string pattern. So first we're going to look at the head sizes and compare it to the 107. And because the 107 is going down 2 categories of head sizes, and what I mean by that, if you look at the green row under head sizes, I have the second row in the green, the 107, 110. It goes down to 102, 105, but that's not this head size yet. So I'm basically going to another category where I'm going to a 98, which means I would have to actually decrease the tension not by 2, but by 4 pounds because of the difference in head size. Now, in terms of the string pattern, this has a 18 by 19 string pattern. And this one has a 16 by 17. So anytime you go from a dense to an open string pattern, you're going to have to increase the tension. And again, because I'm crossing over two categories or groups that I have here, I'm actually going to have to increase the tension by 4 pounds. So first you have to subtract, then you're going to add. So we're back at 50 pounds. So what I'm going to do is string this one up at 50 pounds. All right, so let's see if we get better luck with this one. And again, 33 is the target. And when I said this racket has an interesting dynamic, usually it's just the head size or the string pattern that you're adjusting for, but this one went back and forth. Yep, so this one came out right at 33, so I'm happy to report that this one matched up. Now I'm going to just check the string bed deflection just to see. The other one was 50. And that's always nice when the two match up, or at least they agree with each other. So yeah, so this one's coming in at 48, but again, the DT matched, so that was the goal. Whenever I'm stringing rackets for clients, I do use the ERT 300 to track my consistency, and I do stay within plus or minus 1 DT. So when I strung this racket at 50 pounds at 33 DT, when this racket came out at 32, it was still within that plus or minus 1, and it was strung at 55. And then when I strung the smallest head size with the very open string pattern, it stayed at 50 pounds and that one matched up. But it's always nice when you can match the DT spot on. If you participated in a contest and you guessed 55 and 50, you are the winner. However, if no one guessed that, I'll pick the person that came the closest and declare you the winner. Now the moment you've been waiting for. As for the contest winner, no one correctly guessed the correct reference tensions, but I do have two winners for coming in the closest. So Anthony, I'll be sending you a towel, and Tony, you'll be getting your shirt in the mail soon. Now in the spirit of giving, I wish I could give away an ERT 300, but instead I have an affiliate link, and if you go to ERT 300 and use the promo code AMStringing, you can get 10% off the regular price. Thanks for watching. Happy stringing. And let your strings play.